We appreciate all of you joining us. As I mentioned, we want to provide immediate availability today. No one will do a full press conference featuring Tim Smachenko and Cucho Hernandez upon his arrival. We'll keep you posted once we have that date. Today, we'll go ahead and get started. And our first question will go to Pat Murphy, followed by Jacob Myers, and then Felipe Cardenas from The Athletic. Go ahead, Pat.
Hey, Tim, thanks for doing this with us. My first question, I guess, is just, could you take us through kind of the timeline? Obviously, we know with Giassi moving on, this became a priority, but at what point did you start looking at Cucho, and when was he the guy for you guys?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. Good question. Well, obviously we came to the season with Giassi and Miguel Berry kind of fighting it out up top to be the starting striker. But we also knew that we were thinking long term that there might be a possibility with Giassi coming out of contract that this would happen or could happen as early as the summer. So we started looking during preseason in the February-March window just to start to collect and assemble names in this category, in the striker position, as well as different price points. And so whether or not that's a DP striker or maybe a price point that's a salary cap player, we started to assemble a list of players. That was in February and March. Obviously, we weren't able to officially start moving things until we made the trade to move Giassi to Colorado in April. And that's when things started moving in earnest, where we're going to visit players, we're honing in on the profile of the player, looking at the analytics of a player, having our scouting team start to reach out to their network and watch players live. And so fast forward, obviously, that's April and May. And then by the time June rolled around, we had our handful of players that we were looking at and presenting to Caleb and really trying to figure out who was a match for what our team needs now and in the future. Obviously, there's a lot more that went into it. We could talk at a different time about all the details surrounding it, but it really spanned 5 to 6 months in terms of trying to land a player of this profile.
Thank you, Tim. Next, we'll go to Jacob Myers, followed by Felipe Cardenas from The Athletic and Tom Boger from MLSsoccer.com.
Hey, Tim, thanks for doing this again. Hope to see you sometime this week. Just, you had mentioned, I believe, in your statements announcing the signing that he had a lot of considerable interest still in Europe and whatnot. What, in your conversations with him, made him choose Columbus? Was it kind of simply the best offer on the table? And I guess take us into how you guys knew of the interest and competed against those offers once you narrowed in on him.
Thanks, Jacob. For me, it came down when we talked to him and his agents. It was the project, the people, and the league, right? So the project first is what does our club stand for? Are we trying to compete for titles? We are. Are we ambitious? We just built a new training ground, a new stadium. And when he saw that, his eyes lit up, and clearly he recognized that our ownership group and our leadership group and Caleb were focused on being at the upper echelon of MLS. And so it was evident from the project of the last few years that we are a club on the rise and a club that wants to be consistent contenders. So the project was important for him. Along the same lines, he wanted to be the guy. Over the last few years at Watford, it's a very difficult league in the Premier League. For teams that are sort of on the lower half of in that league to obviously stay up in the Premier League. And he found himself not playing as much as he wanted. As well, he was at times pushed to the wing, which he can play, but he does prefer up top being a striker, and he saw the ability to do that with us. Second was the people. Your ability to have conversations with players and connect with them. And that starts with our front office, with Issa Tall, our assistant GM, and Neil McGuinness, Julio Velasquez in front office. Importantly, Caleb Porter doing the homework and getting on the phone with the player to communicate what he expects out of his players, especially players that can be the face of the club, right? How it's about the team and not the individual, but you need certain difference makers and people to step up in moments to carry the team, and that's what Caleb's looking for. And then the league, the league is rising. The global recognition of the league has changed dramatically over the last, I think, even 3 to 5 years. We're getting more calls than ever in terms of interest. We're actually we're at the price point now where we're competing globally for players like we never have before. I mean, we are going head to head with Liga MX, and now with some of the teams in the top 5 leagues in the world, whether or not it's the Premier League, La Liga, Germany, France, or Italy. We are going head to head, and I've never seen that before. And what players are choosing now is to look at MLS seriously. They see that players cannot just move from South America to Europe, but you can come to MLS, become a globally recognized name, play an extremely high level of soccer, win championships, play in a tremendous environment, right? A world-class environment like at Ohio Health Performance Center and Lower.com Field, and then possibly move back. Your career's not over. And I think that's what this is emblematic of a new era for MLS, where there's players maybe in their prime who are looking to make the jump to Europe, but now players from Europe in top leagues are looking at MLS as a destination.
Do you just have an approximate date when he'll join the team in training yet?
Yeah, we're planning and hoping for next week. Obviously, some of that depends on his visa status and his ability to come back into the country. But the window opens, in the first week of July, and then we have our match against Chicago, which we're hoping and planning that he can participate in that match.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Next, we'll go to Felipe Cardenas, followed by Tom Bogert, and then Whitney Hardy.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to say hello to you, Tim, and congratulations on the signing. Obviously very ambitious and a very good player. I mean, you said it yourself, he's proven it into the top leagues in the world and honestly in difficult situations. But still a young player, and still a player that, just 2 appearances for the Colombian national team, and yet you referred to him, according to the press release, as a world-class player. So that sounds just as ambitious as the signing. Do you truly believe he is that caliber of player, considering his most prolific season was in the 2nd division of La Liga?
Yeah, no, I do. I think playing and competing in the top league in the world makes you world class. And what I mean by that is, if you actually go over and watch the Premier League, like in person, and you can pick it up on TV, but you actually go over and watch, and whether or not that's Chelsea or Manchester City or Watford, the pace is incredibly fast. It's physical. The game intelligence is high. So when you're a player who scores 5 goals in 11 starts, I know it's maybe a team at the bottom of the Premier League that's fighting for promotion relegation, which we don't even need to talk about how difficult that and challenging that is. But when you score an incredible goal against Arsenal, when you scored against Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester City, for a team that's not spending as much as those teams, it takes talent to do that. And I think it takes world-class talent to do that. So you look at some of the goals he's scored, he's quick, he's agile, he has the ability to create his own shot, which was an important factor for us. It's one thing to have players, this sort of traditional striker that can finish chances off of flank service and from the outside. But a player for us right now is that was needed is a player that can, unbalance or, destabilize the defense, find that extra few inches or yards to get the shot off. And he clearly can do that both inside the box and outside the box.
Did he express a desire to, compete, be the guy, win, prove his talent, and then get back to Europe? Did he express that with you?
I think he talked about the desire to be the face of a club and to lead the league in scoring. I mean, that's his desire. Those are his goals that he set for himself to come to MLS. I think it starts there. But he also recognized that if he does that, teams will be looking at our players. I mean, just look at the slew of transfers that we've seen this summer that are going to, Arsenal in the past. It's Manchester City from our club, Zach Steffen. So he knows that clubs are watching. But first and foremost, his priority is to establish himself here, score a lot of goals, win trophies. I think he's excited by the fact that he's playing in the US and Canada. He's a little bit closer to home. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he goes back to Europe. But I think that there's a possibility. And I think that's important for all of us to note that you're not coming back here or here to retire. You're actually coming here to have a great career, which opens up opportunities, especially if you're winning.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Tom Bogert, followed by Whitney Harding, and then Clay Hall from ABC6.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks, Tim, for taking the time. Congrats on getting this deal over the line. I'm sure these talks have been happening for a long time, so always a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of on that thread, were you given this level of budget ahead of time in terms of making a club record signing, or was it more of a case-by-case basis? We'll bring this to ownership when we think we can make a deal happen. And I guess in that realm, were you looking at other players in this price point, or was it really just kind of Cucho and hey, we decide we think he's really worth this money?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. We obviously have a budget and an annual budget, which we review and not unlike many teams around the world. But the one thing that's different about our ownership group is that if there's a player that's outside of our budget, if we can make a case for him, and if the player is going to be a difference maker, to Cucho and a few other players, then they will support us. But it's not something that we start off by doing. I mean, the goal is to find the best player you can with the budget that you have. We're excited about this because we had our players that a handful of players, like I said, that whether or not it's our scouting or analytics that demonstrate the ability to do well in our league. Then there's a bucket of what we call stretch players that it's not even the price point, but just their profile. It might be unlikely for them to sign with us. Maybe they're under contract, or we would have to explain what the project's about. And so you have to put greater efforts in for those players. But when those players become interested, they move over into your primary channels of work, and you put a lot of resources and efforts and time into those players. And that's what happened with Cucho. There's about 3 players in that category where they were stretch, whether because of profile or because of price. While we were working on those, you always keep the main group of players going, because if you can bring those players to the end and make sure that they're a possibility, that gives you the confidence and leverage to attack these players or these deals with confidence. And so it was really about ownership's blessing and support to go after them. We always want to have them as an option. I think that's reflective of what we're trying to build in Columbus. We again want to be a club in the upper echelon of MLS. I think we've demonstrated that with the resources in our stadium, our training ground, the Darlington Nagby trade, which is historic at the time, Lucas Zelerion. But that was, as new ownership came in, I think we wanted to show with this signing that we're not finished. We want to reach higher. We want to push harder, and we want to be a consistent contender. And I think that's what this signing demonstrates.
Thank you.
As we begin to wrap up our availability, we'll next go to Whitney Harding, followed by Clay Hall, Jacob Myers, and the final question will go to Pat Murphy.
Hey, Tim, thanks so much for doing this again. You talked about how, obviously we know how talented Cucho is, and you talked about how he can create his own shot from the striker position, but there are a lot of other guys on that pitch at the same time. What is it about his style that you think will mesh well with the guys you already have, like especially Lucas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think soccer is one of those unique sports where each player is a piece of the puzzle, and your entire puzzle changes when you change the pieces. And so you have to make sure that there's a dominant piece with Lucas, and we have other players on the offensive side of the field that need to work well with the striker up top. And I would names we have Molino, we have Derek Etienne, we have Yao Yeboah. And so how do those pieces all fit together? What spaces they take up on the field? what types of runs does Cucho like to run? For him, that's what the reason why we land on him as opposed to just a classic tall big striker is that he was one of the most versatile of the players we found. So he's played up top in a single striker system. He's played out wide, both on the right and the left. And he's also playing as a withdrawn forward and sort of a 10, 9.5 role. And so the flexibility to put Lucas and Cucho up top together, something that's interesting for Caleb, obviously with Molino out wide or Molino underneath, creates a lot of interesting ideas and opportunities. And I think that was one of the most important things for our coaching staff and for Caleb was the flexibility it gives tactically in our team. MLS has evolved as a league where you can no longer have one single look. You have to be able to have an identity at home, on the road, maybe a couple at home and a couple on the road, depending on if you're in the regular season or in the playoffs. So his versatility was one of the most important things we found, along with his technical skill, his game intelligence, his ability to, like I said, combine with players and create his own shot.
And my second one real quick is, have you heard reaction from the current players on the team to this exciting signing?
Yeah, I mean, when you first, Caleb's the one who will talk to the players in terms of talking with them. When it's close to being signed, he'll start to bring them into the fold, especially the leadership group. And I'll tell you, he uses them as a sounding board, and they were extremely excited. Let's just say that. So he came up right to my office and said, "Hey, I told D, Darlington, and Lucas, and a couple of the other players, and they immediately talked about how they he's an elite level talent, how they want to have him over for dinner, they want to bring him into the fold. It shows the character of our locker room, how they want to reach out to the players even before their side to start to bring them into the fold. And I think that's important for their assimilation, especially when they're coming in during the middle of the year."
Thanks, Tim.
We'll go to Clay Hall, followed by Myers, and finally Pat Murphy.
Hey, Bez, does this, you alluded to this a little bit, but does it signal a new era for Major League Soccer? I've been here 25, 28 years, and there's a lot of guys who have come from all over the world to play for the Crew, but they didn't come at 23. They came at 33. So at this point, how big a victory is this for this league to attract that kind of talent at that age?
Clay, thanks for the question. I sure hope so. I mean, I really do hope so. I think we've seen different eras of Major League Soccer, the David Beckham and the DP level, the DP player category being announced sort of 2007, 2008 with Henry coming in and a number of players in the first initial years. Then I think that there was a second stage where players sort of in their prime or at the end of their prime. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of that in Toronto with Javinkos and Altidores and Bradley's coming in. And I know that there are other players across the league that have decided to come in their prime. Around that same time, I think there were some young South Americans that started to come in. I think the Almirones, those signings really marked a new era in MLS in terms of having a destination for young, talented South Americans to go over to Europe, probably before their prime. This one is a little bit different because he's literally entering his prime years. He's already experienced the top level in the Premier League and in La Liga, and he's now chosen that this is the best place for his career, and he believes he can do it with the Columbus Crew and in Major League Soccer. So I sure hope so. I would love to see more players who are 23, 24 coming from Europe who've already developed some over in Europe within the top leagues. We have the World Cup this year. Obviously, we signed a new deal with Apple, and I know our fans would love to see talented players from Europe, more of them coming over here so that they can not just be here for 2 or 3 years. Maybe they're sold, but maybe they sign a new contract and they're with the club for 10 years and they become icons and part of our circle of honor at the Crew. We would love for that. And that would truly be a new era for Major League Soccer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next, we'll go to Jacob and then Pat Murphy.
Tim, when you re-signed Lucas, I think you had talked about how he had kind of outplayed his current contract and you want to reward players like that. I'm wondering if it works when you're kind of recruiting a player. And I don't know if he knew much about Lucas before him, but you kind of share what type of player he is. Can that be a bit of a recruitment tool too? Because obviously a player of that caliber might not want to come to a club where he's the only kind of big time player that is going to be relied on to be the primary goal scorer. There's another player or a player like Darlington. How does that kind of enter the conversation?
Oh, I think that's one of the primary considerations. I thought it probably falls into the bucket of what project they're going to be a part of, and they review the roster. I mean, one of the first dinners I had with Cucho and with Issa Tall, our assistant GM, was to review our roster and to talk about the players on our team. He already knew many of them. He had already watched a number of games. And so players at this level are extremely intelligent. They're surrounded by good people for the most part. They have good representatives. They have people that are informing them about the project. And so we reviewed, what type of player Lucas is in Darlington and how we have an up and coming players in Aiden, Morris, and obviously the leadership of Jonathan Menses and Josh Williams. So we were excited about not just the player, but the collaboration of our current roster with Cucho.
For our final question, we'll go to Pat Murphy.
Tim, I know the transfer window hasn't even technically opened yet, so I guess it's worth asking. Do you see this being the only move you guys make, or could you envision another move on the horizon once you get into the window?
Always want more, Pat. Look, I never say never. We're looking at our roster. We have players that are just coming back into the team due to injury. Molino is number one on the list in terms of some player that's been out for a while, and you already saw a little of what he can do this weekend. We're going to get healthy. Lucas will be back, and Pedro. So we want to assess what we have, but I wouldn't put it beyond us to have another move in this window. Obviously, it's only a month long. It goes from beginning of July to August. But one thing about this transaction is that while it's a record signing fee, we did structure it efficiently, really evenly over 3 years. And so it puts us just right around the top 10 in the league in spending. Our model is not to be in the top 5. What we truly believe is that you can compete and be at the top if you're right around that sort of 9 to 11 range in spending. And then you have to do it efficiently. So that allows us to look at other opportunities, whether or not that's probably not the DP space, but there's the under 22 category. There's core, TAM players and other core salary cap players that we're looking at. And we won't talk about it here, but there's also a number of young players, whether or not that's our draft picks and Pat Schulte or young homegrown players that are coming along very nicely. So we're excited to assess our roster over the next 3 to 7 games, and then determine if we need to make a move, any more moves in the summer transfer window.
Thank you, Tim. That's going to conclude today's media availability with Tim Vespachenko. We appreciate you joining us. For local media members, we'll be having an open training session today at lower.com field. You may begin arriving at 5:30 p.m. We hope to see you there.
Get some
Thanks, Tim.
sleep.
Thanks,
Get some
Carlos.
sleep.
Thanks for joining.